and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And happy birthday, America. You're 238. We're feeling very conflicted about you this week.
Because we had two devastating decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court that will hurt the LGBT cause.
But the court did decline to hear a challenge to California's ban on so-called conversion therapy for minors.
They just can't make up their...
M-I-N-O-R-S. Okay?
Yeah.
Children.
They can't make up their mind. President Obama will, he says, ban discrimination against transgender federal employees.
And we will bring you the highlights from LGBT Pride gatherings here and abroad.
There's so much news that this is now our fifth headline. A federal judge in Kentucky overturns the state ban on same-sex marriage, and Indiana is ordered by the Seventh Circuit to recognize at least one lesbian couple as married while the cases go through their process.
In Boulder, Colorado, and St. Louis, Missouri, where same-sex marriage has probably not been legalized, marriage licenses were nevertheless issued to same-sex couples by city officials.
And that lesbian sheriff of Latta, South Carolina, has been reinstated in a very emotional town ceremony.
A transgender woman is murdered outside of Cincinnati, the fourth such murder in the last month in the United States.
And the Vatican, surprise, surprise, is digging in against gay people while trying to sound softer. And with that, a footnote, there is a scandalous story about the Catholic bishop in Uganda.
Which we will get to if you stay tuned. So we start with Hobby Lobby, which you've heard a lot about. This is a decision by the court that allows closely held companies. These are companies that have where 50% of the stock is held by 5 or fewer people, which is more than half the countries in the United States.
Companies.
Companies.
You said countries.
Oh, sorry. Companies to invoke their sincere religious beliefs to not cover contraception and God knows what else because the Supreme Court ain't telling. Could easily open the door to all kinds of anti-LGBT discrimination, AIDS discrimination, anti-trans treatment, etc. We're not sure, but and the court in some ways says, oh no, we're not. You know, people still have to be able to get transfusions and things like that, even though some sincere religious people object to that. What have they done?
Well, overall, you're right. This is a decision that is horrendous. That the majority says, oh, don't worry, it's not such a big deal. And the minority, in the voice of Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg, says, oh, watch out for this. This is outrageous.
Well, they say, we're not opening the door to discrimination, but what the hell is denying women access to reproductive, rights? What is that other than discrimination?
Well, what it is, and I want to go through some of the details of this, but what it is overall is deciding that the bosses get to control the lives of the employees. What this really is an economic decision that favors the 1%, the rich.
And once again, treats corporations, companies like people, which was not the. This is all based, by the way, folks, not on the First Amendment right to religious freedom. It is based on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, passed virtually unanimously by the Congress under President Bill Clinton, which was brought into effect because somebody who smoked or used peyote, is that how you say it?
Native Americans were using peyote as a religious element.
And they lost their unemployment benefits. Of course, the Congress today could care less about people losing unemployment benefits for any reason.
Well, they lost their jobs because they were drug counselors, and they got drug tested, and they were found to be using peyote. And they sued and said, wait a minute, we have a right to our religious practice, and the court turned them down. and said, no, you don't. So then Congress, in high dudgeon, said, well, of course an individual has a right to their own religious practice. Democrats and Bill Clinton as president, and passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So that was about individuals being able to practice their individual religious practice, like can Muslims wear beards as police officers when police officers in that town are not allowed to, or Sikhs wear turbans, or whatever the religious practice is. But what this Supreme Court has done is take that law, and this is a statutory case, not a constitutional case, and they've put that Religious Freedom Restoration Act up against Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which is how the administration is trying to enforce this payment for contraceptives.
Right.
And the court has said, well, not only does an individual have a right to their religious freedom, but individuals who own a corporation, a for-profit corporation, right. Because nonprofits and religiously affiliated nonprofits, hospitals, Catholic charities, whatever, have had some leeway before.
Well,
but
they were given a workaround to which some of them still object.
Yes. In that case, but even more broadly, they have some religious freedom rights. But now we move to for-profit corporations, only the ones that are family-controlled at this point, to say, well, you know, they're for-profit corporations, but they're run by people. And these are people who have religious views, and we can't impose upon their religious views. Never taking into account the religious views or the constitutional rights of the employees of the corporation. We have now said that the bosses trump everything. The 1%, the people in charge are in charge of everything, and the employees have no rights under those bosses.
This could have many other ramifications, like those cake bakers who don't want to bake cakes for gay couples.
Well,
they say no, but you wait.
Well, here's the footnote on that. Where this doesn't apply so far in Alito's ruling is, for instance, if you have a locality like the United States that has laws against racial discrimination. This would not trump that in his explicit words. So the reason we won against the cake bakers in Washington and the photographer in New Mexico is that those states have state laws that forbid discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation.
Justice Ginsburg, who wrote the dissent, says that claims will proliferate, especially to get exemption from human rights laws protecting LGBT people. She was specific about that, citing the Minnesota and New Mexico cases like the wedding photographer. Here's her quote: "How does the court divine which religious beliefs are worthy of accommodation and which are not?" This whole thing about sincere religious belief. Well, Hobby Lobby used to give contraceptive coverage. They said they didn't know they were doing it, but they used to do it, and they invest in companies that provide that make contraceptives.
They also do a ton of business with China, which of course has all sorts of mandatory
one-baby laws.
Yes, and abortion rampantly and contraception. So
Congress could fix this by altering the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Unlikely to happen with a Republican Congress, but I guess the Republicans are going to have to decide, do they want to be the party against contraception? You will remember that this came up in the debates during the presidential campaign. Questions were asked of Mitt Romney on contraception. He said, contraception? I mean, no, this isn't a public issue. This is not an issue. He didn't want to. He didn't want to be.
Questions were asked of Rick Santorum, who said he is adamantly against contraception because of his fundamentalist Catholic beliefs. And yes, it could come to that. Now, in this particular realm of this contraception question, what this case ideally would do is take all this insurance coverage nonsense out of the hands of private insurance companies and out of the hands of employers and build us a single-payer universal health care plan in this country that would get rid of all these kinds of issues.
I think the Congress is ready to do that. Obama can
Your sarcasm
can do some workarounds for the women who work for these corporations by using the kind of workaround that they used with the actual religious organizations.
Sure, but as you pointed out, even that is not enough. These religious organizations are objecting to the fact that their employees are being given any help outside. They don't want to be associated with it in any way. They want it completely forbidden. Now, this is more chipping away at the Affordable Care Act, which is what the right wing has in mind as a major part of their agenda. So they're celebrating that part of it, too. It could, specifically in terms of LGBT people, what if religious organizations or bosses in for-profit companies don't like the idea of gay men having sex and don't want to pay for Truvada as pre-exposure prophylaxis? That's a very expensive drug, and that could disappear.
They're paying for Viagra, by the way.
Oh, all these private insurance companies for years have covered Viagra and not covered female contraception. That is a standard long before we got to religious issues.
I just hope it opens up a bigger and bigger gender gap, and more of us who obviously side with women, never voting Republican again.
Transgender care, of course, could be something that comes under attack by the so-called religiously motivated. That's could be very dicey. And of course, we also have to acknowledge, as we worry about whether the non-discrimination laws that exist for sexual orientation and gender identity will insulate us from this, there are, of course, many jurisdictions where we have no protection at this point anyway.
Yes.
So Hobby Lobby just reinforces that.
Let me just talk to the viewers a second. Hello.
Please.
Hi. This is why you better get out and vote in 2014 for at least for Democratic control of the Senate. Because if we lose control of the Senate, Obama will never be able to confirm another federal judge, right?
Absolutely.
Basically, and they might hold on to it in 2016. That means Hillary or whoever, even if we were able to elect a Democratic president, I'm not for anybody yet, but they would not be able to confirm Supreme Court justices other than right-wingers, because that's what Republicans want. So you've got to vote in 2014. It's more important even than 2016 when we vote for president.
And
please.
As you point out, whatever you think of an individual candidate, what is important here is Democratic control of the Senate and in our dreams, the House, and certainly the presidency. But at issue right now is the Senate in 2014. And coming off this Hobby Lobby decision, we already have religious leaders calling up the White House, sending them letters saying, well, see, the Supreme Court says you have to have broad protections for religious ideas. So as you write these executive orders covering federal contractors for not discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, or cover the federal government for non-discrimination in gender identity, you must include very broad religious exemptions, as already exists in the proposed Employment Non-Discrimination Act.
And which we are opposing in its present form. But I would remind the president that when you were talking about federal contractors, you were talking about people providing services, public services, on our dime. And you should not give money to any of them that do any of this kind of discrimination. They are entitled to their beliefs. There's no federal entitlement to that kind of money.
Or to bringing those beliefs into the public workplace and public accommodations that involve a diverse crowd of people across the board. And what we're seeing here is the gradual shift to Iraq.
Yes.
You know, you think Sharia law is far-fetched. What do you think these decisions are doing? They are establishing the primacy of religious belief and religious principles.
Generally the Christian religion.
Absolutely. But whatever it is, whatever religion it is religion trumping the civil laws that we have in this country.
So the other side has religion, and the other side, not that we don't have religious people on our side, but the other side also has a lot of money. And the only money that we get on our side basically is union money. and a decision by the Supreme Court about home health care aides basically said that since they're not, they have private employers who select them, even though they're funded by Medicaid, and the union protects them and has raised their wages and everything, they don't have to give the union anything.
Right.
They don't have to pay a fee. They don't have, and because that's making them support speech that they might not want to support. Wow! And this was just for this. They said
How
again.
about the employees who don't want to support the religious speech of their employers?
Yes.
That doesn't count.
Yes. So. This is the first step in this. They thought this decision might be more far-reaching, going after all union checkoffs. It did not. But Alito was saying, please bring me a case like that. I'll do that.
Well, and then one of the other important decisions at the Supreme Court this week was about the buffer zone around abortion clinics. Totally gone. You can go, dump a can of paint on a head of a woman. You can't really, but you can go scream in her ear. My
niece in Arkansas used to be a linebacker protecting women going in. She's a big woman.
Clinic defense.
Yeah, to go into clinics. That's what we used to have before we had these protection bills.
Even with the protection bills, it was only a 35-foot buffer zone. And believe me, people are still running the gauntlet to get into these places.
Oh, they just want to talk to them. They just want to counsel them.
You know what the buffer zone is at the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
250 feet.
Yeah.
That still stands.
At the polls, we've got a big buffer zone around polling places. But women are just going to have to put up with this. It is the war on women. I mean, it's not any kind of an exaggeration. It is a physical war on women.
Exactly.
But we were one that's not a silver lining, but let's say a bronze lining, was that the court declined to take the case against the California law banning conversion therapy for young people. So that goes into effect. Yeah,
you know what Matt Staver of the Liberty Counsel said after that decision? You think our rhetoric gets carried away? Here's what Matt Staver said. Because the court refused to hear his challenge to the ban on conversion therapy for minors, abused youth will now be forced to pursue unwanted same-sex behavior. Unbelievable. And another bad decision from the Supreme Court this week was curtailing recess appointments.
Oh, God, yes.
That's how Jim Hormel got appointed ambassador under Clinton. It's how Hy Feldblum got appointed to the EEOC under Obama.
The Republican minority in the Senate has found a way to keep the Senate in session virtually all the time by having somebody run down to the floor and say something, and then it's
every 3 days.
It's not a real recess, they say. But recess appointments are in the Constitution. And I think that, well, look, this is why I say elections have consequences. And all these justices are the results of Republican presidents who are doing us in from the grave in many cases.
So we're going to take a breather from all that bad news and celebrate Pride that happened primarily last weekend, 45 years since Stonewall.
Everybody was getting into the act this week. The United Nations even had a Pride celebration, and we have a picture of it. Our own Bill Ballman was one of the speakers at this. Yeah, there he is.
On the right.
On the right with,
Jennifer Rabb, the president of Hunter College, in the floral...
In the center there is our UN ambassador, Samantha Power. You may recognize the person next to her besides Bill as Zachary Quinto.
Yep.
And then a young guy from the Trevor Project, which was a co-sponsor of the event. Bill spoke very movingly about his experiences in the Gay Activist Alliance in the early days. Samantha Power certainly put herself on the side of LGBT rights around the world, although more about that later, unless you want to talk about it now. And Zachary Quinto said, but my generation, he said, is lazy.
Well, yes, they are.
And takes too much for granted. But he himself is very involved with the Trevor Project. Well, and I'm not saying Jonathan Groff doesn't do some good things too, but he was the Grand Marshal at one of the Grand Marshals at the New York Pride Parade. So I went up to him and just said, "Oh, how does this feel?" He says, "Oh, I've never been to one of these before." I thought, you've been out. He says, well, when I came out, he said, I told my parents, I'm gay, but it's not like I'm going to march in any parades. when he's a celebrity, when he came out, the whole world knew. So what's the problem?
The White House held its latest Pride reception on Monday the 30th. They've held one every year, I think, since Obama's been in office. He gave a good speech. You can find it on the White House website, whitehouse.gov. And he made a surprise announcement. We knew, because he'd announced it a week earlier, that he was going to write an executive order for federal contractors, no discrimination against LGBT employees. But he said he's going to add no discrimination against federal employees on the basis of gender identity or expression in another executive order.
Now, although we're not sure it's going to cover the military, and we doubt it's going to cover the military, that would be bigger news, because transgender folks are still not protected in the military. He gave a couple of shout-outs. He thanked Tobias Wolff, his old gay advisor, who has been lobbying hard to say, get the religious exemption out of ENDA, and don't put it in the executive order. And he thanked his out-gay professor at Occidental College, Lawrence Golden, from 1979. He said he was the first openly gay person I knew who was unapologetic in 1979.
Okay. And at New York City Pride, there were about 1 million people. It was pretty huge, and led by a contingent of Boy Scouts. And you had...
Yes. We have a picture of this kid. So this is Scouts for Equality. So I said, who's an actual scout here? Because they're the ones who could get in trouble for being in uniform and marching for a cause. And they said, talk to this guy. His name is Michael Brownstein. He was there. He's 15. He was there because his father was thrown out of the Scouts. He and his father delivered pizzas to same-sex couples who were rushing to marry in Utah under a court order. So they came in from Salt Lake City to be in this. He could be thrown out for marching here.
They're straight.
They're both straight. He said, he said to me, scouting teaches us to be morally straight. We can't do that if we let people be discriminated against.
Well, that was always Jim Dale's line. That's what every good scout who believes in us says. They say morally straight is supposed to support this.
He's a very brave young man, and his father is very good. They're Jewish in Salt Lake City, but they're not in the Mormon, one of the Mormon chapters. They're in one of the Catholic chapters of the Scouts. So that's the thing. It's all Mormons and Catholics.
Well, but what is shocking is that his dad was expelled as a scoutmaster, not because he's gay, because he isn't, but just for supporting gay people getting married in Salt Lake.
We can't have that.
Oh, he took pizzas in uniform to the
I guess that
City Hall?
had to be the reason.
No, I don't know.
Right.
But you also had the experience of marching with our ENDA is not equal banner in the New York City parade.
Ann Northrup had a great idea, and it was to say, let's take the ENDA is not equal banner and let's march in the parade right behind the Human Rights Campaign. So the Human Rights Campaign contingent turns out to be nothing but, save for a couple of people, employees of McCann Erickson, some of whom did not know what HRC stood for. They were having a good time. They didn't know what ENDA was either. And I have to say, we're marching along with this banner, and I'm looking at people, because I was helping hold it with my friend Tony Halbert and others, Andrew Miller, others. And I'm looking at people on the sidelines, and they're going, to their friends, what is ENDA? But there was Duncan Osborne and Ken Kidd handing them leaflets, thousands of leaflets, telling everybody about this controversy.
And talking to them and explaining it. But what it reveals, aside from the idiocy of HRC for not showing up in the world's biggest pride parade, and, how dare they? They've never had a presence in New York ever since they endorsed Al D'Amato for senator as a Republican years ago. But they have done no grassroots work on this.
Well, we have. I talked to Congress members Jerry Nadler, Carolyn Maloney, and Sean Patrick Maloney, and they all expressed strong misgivings about the overbroad religious exemption, as did Senator Brad Hoylman from New York and Council members Corey Johnson and Assemblymember Dick Gottfried, who are our representatives. So now's the time to call your representative in Congress and tell them you oppose ENDA in its present form and you want an equal rights bill.
a comprehensive civil rights bill that covers, housing, public accommodations, employment, credit, federal programs, and that does not have an overbroad religious exemption, just one that's equivalent to the Civil Rights Act of '64, which we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the signing of this week.
In San Francisco, Tim Cook, who's the out CEO of Apple, attended San Francisco Pride, as did thousands of Apple employees, I heard. But, James Stewart, the reporter, wrote a piece in the Times on gay CEOs, and then he was on CNBC. And somebody said to him, what about that Tim Cook? He's been out. And James Stewart goes, no. I don't think so. No. It was oh, how dare you? Tim Cook's been out forever.
Well, yes and no. He doesn't really talk about it.
Well, he marched in the Pride Parade.
Well, so did Michael Brownstein.
Unlike Jonathan Groff for many years, but Jonathan is doing it now.
Look, I think of Tim Cook as out, but he doesn't talk about it. He does not talk about being gay. He doesn't.
Okay.
He's been on the Out 100 list. He does. He's described as gay everywhere, but he doesn't talk about it.
And no correction has been issued.
That's true.
All right.
All right.
More.
And we want to alert you to there was also a big NASA group at San Francisco Pride, evidently. Well, I don't know if they were marching for the first time, but I hope they were celebrating Sally Ride.
Okay.
Still one of my big heroines.
Okay.
On July 12th, there will be the first Pride celebration for the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. They're going to have singing, HIV testing, drag acts. But the first Pride celebration, July 12th, Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Congratulations.
Okay. On to marriage news?
Sure.
In Kentucky, federal judge John Hayburn, who said that the state already said back in February that the state must recognize out-of-state same-sex marriages, struck down the state ban on same-sex marriages. He stayed his own ruling, so there were no weddings. He said the law was a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and the Sixth Circuit is now going to hear marriage cases in August from Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee.
The right wing had made their usual, procreation arguments and the good of the children. He said, this is not an argument that serious people would make.
Like they're going to stop having children if you let gays get married.
There's a great thing on the internet where you can write your own opinion on a same-sex marriage case. You choose how vitriolic you want to be and how...
Well, this decision, by the way, they're saying was a little different from some of the other decisions and what he based it on.
What he did was he based it on a pure equal protection argument, which is great because that's a constitutional guarantee.
Right.
It's what it always should be, and he did the right thing.
Right.
And meanwhile, in Indiana, the Seventh Circuit stayed the Indiana marriages that had started there at the request of the Attorney General.
But it also ordered the state to recognize one marriage of Amy Standler and Nikki Kwasny of Munster, Indiana. Kwasny is battling advanced ovarian cancer. The recognition was ordered on an emergency basis. That was the totality of the decision.
In Utah, you may remember last week, the 10th Circuit handed down the first appeals court ruling legalizing same-sex marriage, upholding the lower district court ruling. The Utah Attorney General says he now will petition the Supreme Court of the United States. This could be the first case to go there. He could request a full en banc hearing from the 10th Circuit. He may or may not do that, but he will go to the Supreme Court.
Why is the 9th Circuit, which is so liberal, taking so much time on these cases? They're not going to hear 3 same-sex marriage cases until September 8th. Nevada.
We don't know.
Well, they have said now September 8th for Nevada, Idaho, and Hawaii. Why?
Well, they may have been going through their process about the heightened scrutiny question with the drug companies case, and they may have wanted to get that settled before they launched into the arguments on the marriage cases, but they have been rather slow. But the fun thing about the 10th Circuit ruling, which came down last week, is that Each of these circuits covers a number of states. We've been getting decisions from the district courts that cover a particular state, and then they all go up to the circuit court, which covers a number of states, and gather together cases from various states. So the 10th Circuit covers half a dozen states, but the decision was about the Utah case. Right. So one of the states it covers is Colorado. So the county clerk or the city clerk in Boulder, Colorado, which 40 years ago decided to hand out marriage licenses to same-sex couples for a little while, decided, well, you know, we're subject to the ruling of the 10th Circuit, and the ruling has been stayed for Utah, but it hasn't been stayed for us.
Oh, well.
So I guess same-sex marriage is now legal in Colorado. So she started handing out marriage licenses.
So we have a little video about what Hillary Hall did, if we can pull that up.
In Colorado.
And we are tracking a developing story. This one of the many wedding pictures taken at the Boulder County Clerk's office. You are looking at State Senator Jesse Ulibarri marrying his longtime partner, one of about 30 couples lining up for a marriage license.
For the second day in a row, Boulder issuing licenses to gay couples, knowing full well same-sex marriage is still against the law here in Colorado. Mark Stewart live at the clerk's office.
And Mark, no one is intervening so far.
No, Ann, and this is significant. Unlike other states where we have seen public officials or courts step in, that has not happened here in Boulder, at least just yet. So the stage is set for marriage licenses, same-sex marriage licenses, to be issued for a third day. And we're seeing couples come here from across the state, including a state senator and his partner. A limo ride back home is how State Senator Jesse Ulibarri and his partner Luis Trujillo are ending their day-long celebration.
We're very, very excited.
Just hours ago, they were issued this marriage certificate by the Boulder County Clerk.
We were looking at the certificate like, is this real? Is it real? And it is real.
Yet the State Attorney General John Suthers disagrees, calling the licenses invalid.
I don't really care what the Attorney General says. I want the ability to love and protect my family, and that means that we got a marriage certificate.
The hours ahead could be critical. Legal scholars feel if anyone could put a legal stop to the Boulder clerk, it would be the AG.
So far, the statements coming from that office seem to indicate that they want people to know what they think the law is, but haven't indicated that they're going to take any formal action.
Oh man, that looks good.
The cutting of the cake is a tradition at any wedding. Yet for them, it's the certificate that matters most. Do you view what you did today as a big deal?
Yes, I do. I think it's a big deal. I think it's a big step forward to get our family recognized in the justice system and get protected.
Late today, we talked to the Denver County Clerk's office. Their office is standing by what the clerk here in Boulder is doing, but for the moment, they are not issuing licenses. They want more direction from the court. We're live in Boulder tonight.
And thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, Mark. And all of this based on the 10th.
Yeah, so the Attorney General of Colorado has now announced that he will challenge those licenses.
In Louisiana, federal judge Martin Feldman heard the same-sex marriage case down there, and he said it's only fair to issue one big ruling and not rule piecemeal.
Yeah, so he's going to hear a lot of things. Charlie Crist, who signed the anti-marriage law in Florida and is a big closet case and is running for governor, has now filed an amicus brief supporting marriage in one of the Florida cases.
He's not leading in the polls down there.
He says the reasons against same-sex marriage have been discredited.
By my new party. No,
and my ambition.
Well, Susan Collins has come out. She's the 4th Republican U.S. Senator to endorse same-sex marriage.
But that's a deal with HRC for endorsing her for re-election. More about that in a few minutes.
That's how your friend Kirsten Gillibrand got to be senator in New York. She had to come out for same-sex marriage.
No, that's something she decided to do after she was appointed and over the objections of Chuck Schumer.
We'll talk about this later.
Okay.
In
Missouri, first of all, the ACLU has filed a new lawsuit for 2 couples who were denied licenses in Kansas City.
But we have a picture of I think it's 3 couples that Mayor Francis Slay issued same-sex marriage licenses too last Wednesday, 4 couples, challenging, and then, you know, the validity of these is in question, I guess, as in Boulder. But they had a great time in the office there, sharing the love. So congratulations to them, and thank you, Mayor Slay, for standing up.
We've seen all the books and movies coming out about the Prop 8 case and the fact that former San Francisco Deputy City Attorney Teresa Stewart has been left out of a lot of it.
Yes.
But Governor Jerry Brown of California has now nominated her to the state First District Court of Appeals.
Now, the question was raised whether the Supreme Court might not take a marriage equality case and let all the lower court rulings stand if every circuit were to strike down the ban.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Then you don't need a Supreme Court decision.
Well, if the Supreme Court rejects
the appeals,
doesn't take the appeals, then the decisions stand. So, and if they're in every court and they're uniform, then yeah, we have national marriage rights. Yeah. But we haven't hit every circuit yet.
Supreme Court, why don't you get this over with? And you know, we're not going to forget about Hobby Lobby, but why don't you just get it over with now?
On June 30th, Washington State converted domestic partnerships to marriages automatically.
You had to get out if you didn't want it to be converted.
For people who are 62 or younger. If you were older, you could keep your domestic partnership. This affected 7,500 couples under 63. 1,200 of them have opted out. Okay. And some of them are saying, oh, well, we forgot to opt out. Now we have to get divorced.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And our viewer and friend Tony Pittman in Melbourne, Australia, says he's calculated that now 10% of the world population lives in jurisdictions where same-sex marriage is legal. Yeah. The Logo channel did a show last week called Trailblazers for Pride, and Bill Clinton said to Edie Windsor, the Defense of Marriage Act, which I came to believe was unconstitutional, which I came to believe.
You know, you're supposed to take an oath to uphold the Constitution when you are sworn into almost anything.
How is it that we know when these things are first proposed that they're
announced it on this show at the time?
Unconstitutional.
And didn't even go to law school.
No, but I am descended from a former Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Sort of. Anyway.
No, not sort of, directly.
Yes. And I was happy to see Dale Carpenter, a gay law professor in Minnesota, who's not all that liberal. He can be fairly conservative. But he was assigned to write the review of the Ilsen Boyce book in the New York Times, and he eviscerated it.
Yes, he did.
That was beautiful.
They're showboating, those guys. You know, we appreciate that he got into the case, but that's about it at this point. Okay. President Obama nominated out gay Robert Lee Pittman to the U.S. District Court in Texas. He was the first openly gay U.S. attorney in Texas.
And the Texas Democrats at their convention condemned reparative therapy for minors, supported same-sex marriage, supported the full repeal of DOMA, unlike the Republicans in Texas who took the opposite point of view.
Freedom to Work and the Equal Rights Center did a study that said LGBT applicants for jobs are 23% less likely to be contacted for interviews based on resume hints, like, I'm a gay activist. Well, I mean, I don't know exactly how they did this, but that's what
they sent
it to ExxonMobil.
They sent paired resumes, one that was out and one that was not, and the out one had better credentials, and the out one didn't get called back. The employment non-discrimination controversy rages on. Paul Schindler had a great editorial against it in the Gay City News. I had a conversation with Chad Griffin at a house party in New York.
Chad Griffin runs the Human Rights Campaign.
He does, and I tried to appeal to his better instincts. I said, Chad, you could be a hero. Stand up and announce.
You're his hero.
You're the... No, he slobbered all over me. It was really, really painful. He said, I said, look, you can stand up and say, you're the new guy here, you've looked at this bill, and we can do better. We can do a comprehensive
We can do
bill.
it. How about we can do it right? Times
have changed. And he just was, he said, no, we've got, Here's what he said. We have to cover these people right now. So many millions of people will benefit from this. And I said, what about the people who will be fired by religious affiliated groups or people? Wait till Hobby Lobby comes down. And he said, oh, that's only 2% of the population.
That's outrageous that you would throw anybody overboard. I mean, we were always offered these deals in working for human rights laws. And the point about an equal rights bill is it's one of those things that you can't compromise on. Otherwise, you're not equal anymore.
Exactly. And
that's the problem, folks. This is not about letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. It is not good to cover people with a bill that enshrines discrimination against some of our brothers and sisters. We will not do that.
And as the courts expand the definition of who gets to have their religious beliefs trump their employees, then the universe of people who are subject to being fired it expands too. And I also asked him, because that very day HRC had endorsed Susan Collins for re-election as the Republican senator from Maine, and I said, come on. And he said, oh, I love Susan Collins. And I said, control of the Senate?
Well, we'll get to her opponent later. First we want to celebrate what's going on in Latta, South Carolina.
Okay.
We do have something to celebrate this week. First, we have a picture of the Latta, South Carolina City Council. They stood up to well, that's the picture of the
of her being
the sheriff
sworn in.
Being sworn in. Yes, she's the out lesbian sheriff. The mayor got rid of her because she was a lesbian and because she was investigating some of his friends.
Yeah.
And so the council there they are in Latta, South Carolina. They reinstated her, and they took away, the people took away a lot of the powers of the mayor as a result of this. So, folks, we're making progress if that can happen.
But I fear that the Republicans will take away power if they take over control of the United States Senate.
Can't have it.
And HRC endorsing
They have never, if they have what they consider a moderate Republican, they are desperate to endorse them to say that they're nonpartisan. But that's not the way power works.
Well, they have two standards. One is they always want to endorse incumbents, and they always want to endorse people who have done some good things for us. Now, Susan Collins has done some good things for us. Yes. But when you're looking at the bigger picture, make her change parties if you want to have power. But here she is being opposed by a liberal woman, Shenna Bellows in Maine, who is the former head of the ACLU there, who helped pass marriage equality in Maine, who has promised that when she gets to the U.S. Senate, one of the first things she'll do is propose a comprehensive civil rights bill.
Let's show the folks her commercial.
Let's do.
I'm Shenna Bellows, and I'm running for U.S. Senate. I don't take millions of corporate lobbyist dollars, so I'll always remember where I come from. My dad's a carpenter, and he built our home. I know what hard work is. Mom's a nurse. I support health care for all. Grandpa fought in World War II. I'll always stand up for veterans. To save for college, I waited tables. I understand student debt. Brandon and I waited to get married until Maine passed marriage equality. As head of the ACLU, I helped lead that fight. I'm Shenna Bellows, and I approve this message. In the Senate, I'll never forget my roots.
Right on, Shenna.
And there are
good luck to you.
And there are some candidates we don't like, or they certainly didn't like out in Chicago. There's a guy named Republican, the gubernatorial candidate there, Bruce Rauner, R-A-U-N-E-R. So somebody really objected to his anti-gay stance, so they erected a huge banner, there it is, on the route of the Pride Parade. Why didn't we think of this before? Why do we have to carry that banner all the way down the street? Why don't we just stick it on some building? Anyway, it, as you see, it says there, for the benefit of our podcast viewers, on equal marriage, he said, if I were governor, I would veto it. He says he favors a referendum and would abide by the results.
You lose. Yeah, marriage equal in Illinois.
In Washington State, the insurance commissioner said insurance companies can no longer deny transition-related care to transgender folks.
Yes. I reminded them that equal treatment means equal treatment. Thank you to Controller state controller in New York, DiNapoli, and city controller Scott Stringer, they've written a letter to 20 corporations saying, well, you all have these non-discrimination rules in your companies for sexual orientation and gender identity, but you do business all over the world. For instance, in Russia, what are you doing with your employees there? And we invest our pension funds in your companies, and we want to know what your practices are before we decide whether or not to remain invested in your company.
So I saw Tom DiNapoli at a tenants fundraiser the other night, and I said, so what are they saying to you? He says, I just sent the letter today.
Oh,
so I want to hear what happens.
Yeah, well, but hooray for them for doing that.
All right.
In Yankton, South Dakota, a teenager was working at Taco John's and was being harassed by his boss.
And we have a film report on this.
This is ugly.
At the Taco John's.
Tyler Brandt.
It was a mode of alleged discrimination. 16-year-old Tyler Brandt wanted to work at the fast food chain to make some extra money, but he says his manager was always agitated and verbally abusive.
I've been very vulnerable, and I've been allowing him to say things to me that shouldn't be said, and after a while I was just worried about being terminated from my position at Taco John's.
That fear led Brandt to let the words continue until this week, when he says the manager made the ultimate gesture of discrimination.
And pulled me into the office and gave me a name tag that read Gay Tart on it and asked me to wear it. So I put it on because I didn't want to upset him, and I felt that if I did do anything to upset him, that it would cause me to possibly lose my job because he would be looking for ways to fire me.
Brandt says he tried taking it off several times, but he says the manager forced him to wear it all day in front of the customers.
I would always stay behind the till so that they couldn't see the name tag. I didn't want them to see it, but even though they couldn't see it, he would still call me by the name across the store, and customers would notice.
Brandt says the verbal abuse from the manager continued until the moment he left the store. After talking with his partner and close friends, he decided to quit the next day.
After I handed them over my uniform, they told me that they didn't really say anything. They just said okay, and when we went to walk out, he lifted out his hand and said name tag, as though he deserved to have that name tag after his son labeled me.
We did try to reach out to the manager here at Taco John's, and he's told us that he will not be getting any comment on this situation at this time.
Tyler is now searching for a lawyer in hopes of pursuing some legal action that will help him begin to move forward.
And I don't think that any person has to put up with what has been going on. I don't think that anybody should have to put up with any kind of discrimination. It's not fair.
Yeah, people fighting us on discrimination laws say there's no discrimination. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Look at what happened to this poor kid. Anyway, and look what happened in Walnut Hills, Ohio, outside of Cincinnati. Another murder of a transgender woman. We have her picture,
Tiffany Edwards.
Deandra Edwards, 28, found shot to death in the middle of the road. This is the fourth such murder in the United States in June alone. We also have a picture of the alleged perpetrator, Quamar Edwards, no relation to her, wanted by the police for murder. Armed, dangerous, 5'10", 250 pounds. He lived in the 1000 block of Winfield Avenue in Cincinnati. If you have any whereabouts, call the police.
And a strange story from Minneapolis, where the Catholic Archbishop there, John Niestedt, who has said things like gays are sick, has announced that he has asked that an investigation be conducted because he's been accused in at least 10 sworn affidavits by men of sexual harassment and sexual involvement.
Including seminarians and priests and other men. And he denies it all, saying he's been attacked because of his opposition to same-sex marriage.
He has been criticized.
He's been attacking gay people all his life.
Yes, and has been protecting child molesters in the church for years, too. Good news from the Department of Labor, which says, after 2 years of discussion, that it will enforce the ruling by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that said transgender discrimination falls under sex discrimination. So they are now stepping forward to say, okay, we'll pay attention to that.
And the High Court of New York, a liberal court, struck down an anti-cyberbullying law saying it was just too overbroad. This was for Albany County. And also in New York, they let out the cop who was accused of being a cannibal, but they said it's only his fantasy, so they let him out.
Well, he never did anything. He was just fantasizing
other than
online.
Buy some things, some accoutrements for cooking people or something.
Maybe.
But I mean, whatever, something like that. But he never did anything. Fantasy.
All right, international news.
Well, we just got this story about what's going on in Uganda. Shocking news. The Bishop of Jinja, Charles Wamika, I think his name is, Wamaka, he turned in to the police a list of 22 homosexual seminarians from his seminaries. The men were, at least they had time to flee to Kenya and get out, but a petition has been started to the Pope saying, you've got to get rid of this guy if you're and the least bit serious about treating gay people as human beings.
Instead, the Vatican is preparing for its October Families Conference, the one that is the culmination of all the surveying they've been doing of various localities. It looks like they're going to say that the church actually should baptize the children of gay people.
Yeah, things like that. And they're acting like this is a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
But the fact is, they said there are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even analogous to God's plan for marriage and families. In other words, everything. And Dignity basically says, the gay Catholic group, that they had hoped for real dialogue. This is an incredibly insulting document.
Of course.
You got to know when you're being insulted. You know, lay people out there who are not Catholic especially say, oh, the Pope, he's a good guy, he's a good guy. Wrong.
On a better note, Toronto was the host of World Pride this last weekend, and that was a huge success. And there were some fun and interesting prides around the world that we have pictures of. One from the Cape Verde Islands. That's cute. Is that their first pride?
It's another country heard from.
And Singapore had 26,000 people at what they call their Pink Dot Rally.
And the right wing tried to have them banned this year. Didn't work.
No.
And wait till you see this picture from Istanbul. It looks like a Jackson Pollock painting.
It does.
But it is jillions of people down there in Istanbul.
100,000 plus.
In a Muslim nation.
Yes, the biggest pride celebration in a Muslim nation. Congratulations to all of you around the world. We're everywhere.
In the Dominican Republic, the papal nuncio, Joseph Wesolowski,
Haven't we had enough of him?
Was defrocked for child abuse and recalled by the Vatican. Now, this is the country where the Archbishop is criticizing the out gay ambassador.
Yes. There was a new protest at the Beverly Hills Hotel here about what's going on in Brunei and the new laws that are going to kill the women, gays, everybody for all sorts of things. But guess who turns out to be a big friend of the Sultan of Brunei? The British royals.
Oh, right. They're going to
they go to their hotels, they go to their polo fields.
Invite them to their wedding.
The U.S. fashion industry is doing a great job of boycotting the hotels in Paris and Milan.
In Italy, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi wants civil unions this fall. It's the only country in Western Europe that has no partner recognition for same-sex couples.
But in Britain, Prime Minister David Cameron is refusing to open civil partnerships to straight couples. They are still gay only, and Peter Tatchell is upset about the inequality of that.
USAID is putting forth $1.2 million for partnerships to help LGBT-owned businesses in developing countries. And Finland, a committee there, voted against a citizens' initiative proposing gender-neutral marriage, but they will be considering a bill on this in Parliament in the fall.
And Mexico's Supreme Court seems to be legalizing same-sex marriages one by one.
Baja California now has some same-sex couples. They get a critical mass of same-sex couples, then it's legal for the whole state.
Yeah, but it seems to be just individuals.
And the Vancouver British Columbia School Board voted to better accommodate transgender students by approving the use of gender-neutral pronouns. Z, them, zir. Kids get their pronoun of choice.
And a UN resolution was passed to study and support the family, but an amendment to define that as diversity of families was rejected, and that's considered a bad sign in a body that has been very LGBT friendly.
Right.
AIDS news. Well, the big news out of New York was Governor Cuomo taking advantage of the Pride Day celebrations.
Taking advantage? He was threatened with a protest if he didn't come around and approve a plan for ending AIDS by 2020. So he did, and it basically includes a lot of more aggressive testing, more aggressive treatment, and getting drug companies to sell the drugs cheaper by New York State buying in bulk, and getting negative people on Truvada.
Yes, pre-exposure. But, you know, it's interesting. Part of this is about eliminating written consent for HIV testing, which was a big fight years ago. And
we had one right here at this table with that city health commissioner.
And that seems to be no longer something people care as much about. The New York City Department of Health has put out a new campaign after much being yelled at by activists about pre-exposure and post-exposure prophylaxis, and it's a really good campaign that includes good points, but it's taken a lot of arguing.
Okay.
Entertainment news.
Well, Edward Albee's A Delicate Balance is coming back to Broadway this fall with an all-star cast. He, of course, is an out gay playwright. Looking forward to that.
I'm not. I didn't like that play. Luke Grimes, who played James on True Blood, has quit because he didn't want to play a gay storyline.
Yeah. I mean, he plays a vampire. He doesn't want to play, he doesn't want to be kissing no man. He says he said something about it's okay if the other guy is attracted to me, but I don't want to be attracted to him.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Elton John says, I might get married next year, and I'm going to talk to Putin, but, you know, he won't listen to me. What the heck?
And we did watch Vicious on PBS. Three of my favorite actors in the world. I mean, they really are three of my favorite actors in the world. Ian McKellen, Derek Jacobi, and Francis de la Tour. And this thing is crap. It is just stereotypic crap.
I watched it because I was curious.
I didn't smile once.
I was horrified, but what really horrified me was this first episode lasted, I looked at the clock, 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I thought it was 3 hours.
It's so bad.
It was horrible.
How dare they? And Mark Ravenhill, who's an out gay playwright, was one of the co-creators. He's a terrific playwright, and they're just obviously doing this in their sleep for a paycheck.
I want to mourn the death of Nancy Garden at age 76. She was a lesbian and a very well-regarded author. And she wrote a book called Annie on My Mind, which was among the first, according to the New York Times, young adult books to portray a lesbian relationship. And they also say it was the first lesbian novel with a happy ending. Now, I believe this.
We used to all kill ourselves at the end of the story. We had to.
I have said many times, I once had a dream where I was yelling at Lillian Hellman for giving me a negative image of lesbians in the children's hour. But Nancy Garden wrote this beautiful book called Annie on My Mind, much rewarded all over the place, recommended on the 100 Books That Changed the World lists. Really important book. She's survived by her wife, Sandra Scott. They lived in Maine. She was a real pioneer, someone who had a real vision of a positive image for lesbians in literature. And that's all too rare. So thank you, Nancy Garden, for your lifetime of work. And thank all of you for tuning in. We will see you next week. And if you want to be on our list, write to andyhum@aol.com. We'll send you a weekly program note, and we will see you next week.
Bye.